Hey, hi, how are you? Welcome to Banter and Beans. It's a new half-hour series hosted by me, Pat McDonald, and Ben Kinsley, who's joining us on air. Ben, how are you?
Good, thanks, Pat.
Good. Yeah, good to be here together. Ben and I, just for transparency, that's the word of the day. Ben and I are members of the board of directors of Campaign for Vermont, and we also co-host Vote for Vermont, which is a show on public access TV. And we started asking ourselves after the legislature went home, what's brewing in the State House when the legislature is in session and you're having coffee at your dining room table or kitchen table? They actually, I had a guest over here the other day and I said, how many bills do you think they put through in any given year? And she knew from the press, maybe 10. There's 100 bills. 100 bills while you were having your coffee. These bills are getting passed, and I think we decided this summer we'd bring them to you, so you know what's out there, because some of them are a little unnerving, to say the least. But that's what we're going to do today. We're going to bring you two bills. I'm going to do Act number 64, which is an act with regard to the interstate nursing licensure compact. And I thought when I saw the title, well, this can't be too complicated. Wrong. And Ben, what are you doing for us today?
I picked Act 61, which is healthcare practitioners and how they are able to use stem cell and stem cell related products.
Oh, that sounds fascinating. That sounds cool. Why don't you want to kick us off and start with that Act 61, and I'll jump in later with Act 64.
Yeah, so it's not quite as interesting as it sounds, unfortunately, but it is interesting. So there, stem cell products, people are probably somewhat familiar with debates that happened 10, 15 years ago around stem cell extraction for research, right? Typically, they were using non-viable fetuses. In some cases, they're using adult donors as well for stem cells that that come out of the spinal fluid. So what's interesting is some of that research has progressed, and there's now experimental procedures or therapy that use stem cells that some doctors, usually naturopathic doctors, will use on patients with specific illnesses or afflictions or whatnot. So a lot of these procedures are not approved by the FDA yet. So it's kind of still there's maybe some limited evidence to support that they work, but not enough for FDA approval, which is why most of the time these services are provided by naturopathic doctors, because they're outside the jurisdiction of the FDA.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
That was going to be my question, why, but I got it.
Yeah, they're exempt from a lot of the FDA requirements because of the type of license that they have. So anyway, so what's interesting about this is this bill really it's pretty concise and pretty clear about what it does, but basically it does a couple things. First, it requires that any doctor's office that is or healthcare practitioner that is providing these sorts of services, they have to have a written disclaimer in the lobby of their business that says some of these procedures are not approved by the FDA. There are risks associated with them, and then people that actually receive those services have to sign a waiver that says, "I understand this is not an FDA approved procedure," and that they assume all liability and things like that. So yeah, pretty straightforward. The reason for this, of course, is because these are not FDA approved procedures, and we don't really know at this point whether or not whether the efficacy or the effectiveness of these sorts of procedures. So interesting stuff. We'll see. We'll see where that goes. I don't know that many, if any, providers are actually doing this in Vermont, but I think the legislature was trying to get ahead of it a little bit. It seems like what they were doing.
Well, and there's a lot of objection to use of stem cell research, I think mostly on religious grounds, correct?
Yeah, there was yeah, because it was more like there was objections to use of stem cells for research that came from fetuses because they couldn't consent to it.
Right.
Then so that was kind of what the argument was.
And this is used a lot because of spinal cord injuries.
It's used a lot for spinal cord injuries. Stem cells are kind of cool because they're basically a cell that can become anything. And that's one of the reasons why they were using fetuses, non-viable fetuses, 10, 15 years ago for this sort of research, because they have more of them. Because as your body is growing, you're building new cells all the time, and the basic building blocks were stem cells because they can pretty much become anything. They're pretty flexible, so they're kind of like the jack of all trades, if you can think of it that way, when it comes to cellular biology. So, but what was cool about that is basically the theory was they could take a stem cell and then turn it into a kidney cell to replace a kidney cell that had died, right, because of cancer or because of whatever else.
And did they give you any hint in your research about why the FDA is slow to respond? What's missing? What are they looking for? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, so the FDA, there's this kind of gray area of the FDA requires years and years of documentation, clinical trials, all that stuff before they approve any procedure.
Right.
And that documentation just doesn't exist for these procedures. So some, like I said, naturopathic doctors are able to do these procedures, and because they don't require FDA approval. But there are clinical trials, I believe, that are happening with some of these procedures. They're just not to full term yet. Some of those take 10 years or so.
Right.
Interesting side note, when you talk about FDA approval, because a lot of people were complaining about how quick the COVID vaccine went through.
That would be me.
So what's interesting about that, though, is yes, the vaccine itself was new, but the underlying technology, like the way that they did it, has been around for 2 or 3 decades.
Right.
So they just hadn't been applied to a vaccine like this yet. So the underlying technology that enabled the mRNA vaccines has been under FDA review for over 10 years. So. So that technology was already fairly close to being approved for FDA use, and then the emergency, the fact that it was so easily adaptable accelerated that approval.
Yeah. No, that was my initial concern, because I worked for it was a big chemical company, but it was pharmaceutical, agricultural dye stuff. So anyway, the pharmaceutical division, as you just said, would take years and beaucoup bucks to get the clinical trials and animal testing, people testing, just on and on forever, for years. And so, and no amount of money thrown at it could make the test go any faster. That's what concerned me initially about COVID. But the more I read into it, the more sort of comfortable I felt. But it really concerned me in the beginning.
Yeah, there's certainly some room for we don't necessarily know the long term, if there's going to be any long term impacts from the vaccine. But the problem is, we do know that there's probably going to be long term impacts from COVID. So it's like, do you take the one, do you take the monster you know or the monster you don't?
Well, no, exactly,
It's
exactly.
like,
Yeah, and now we have these, well, I was gonna say offshoot, but that's not the right word. What's the word?
oh, the variants.
Variants, thank you. The variances that are a little concerning, although
I
they
saw something
say,
the other day that it said the Delta variant is as contagious as chicken pox.
oh, whoa.
Which is for anyone that's had chicken pox.
Yes, right, we
That's
know about that. And
yes,
that is very highly contagious. I remember
highly.
that. You
Yeah,
could watch it going around your classroom in school.
yeah.
As the chairs were becoming empty, you went, oh, there's another one went down until they got to you. But all right, well, that's cool. So what's the next step? What's next for stem cell research? Do we know?
I didn't look into that, but I'm sure there's other stuff
Yeah,
going on. I mean, again, this was the big area of research,
yeah,
10, 15 years ago. And usually the development cycle on these sorts of things is 10 to 20 years. So,
yeah. Well,
I would imagine we'll be seeing more of this sort of technology as it starts to get
yeah,
approval from the FDA.
yeah.
And I'd say probably we'll see something within the next 5 years that does
Well,
get approved.
I don't mind the issue about spinal cord injuries and stuff, but the cloning thing sort of
Yeah, there's a
that's
lot of
another whole ball of wax I'm not too
yeah,
crazy about.
there's a lot of ethical questions about
Yeah,
that too.
yeah,
So like it's a fun science experiment, but I think most scientists have drawn a hard line at trying to clone humans. Like they've
good.
cloned, goats and stuff or sheep,
Yeah,
but yeah, I think most of them have drawn a hard line at cloning humans because
yeah,
it's just there's too many ethical dilemmas
yeah.
there.
I'm right there with you on that one. Just do it for improving people's health. That'd be good.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
go
my
clone a kidney or something. Grow me a
yes,
kidney.
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So are we I've lost you, Ben.
Oh, you've lost me. Uh-oh. I'm
Am I
still here.
still you're still there? Well, I've lost you. I don't even know what anyway, we have to stop for a second. Can you still see me? I'll have them cut this out. Am I
Yeah, I can
still
still see you.
okay? So I'll just keep talking. I've lost everything. Who the hell knows? All right. So we'll pause for a moment so we can cut this thing. And I'm going to talk about Act 64. And I've got a lot of papers in front of me, so excuse me if I kind of go back and forth. This is about the multi-state nursing licensure compact. Back in 2017 legislative session, Act number 144, the Board of Nursing and the official Office of Professional Regulations was asked to do a study of the licensure compact to see what the cost and benefits were for Vermont if we were to join. And a very comprehensive report was submitted to House and Senate Committee on GovOps on March 15th, 2019. And the report said that there are significant benefits to participating in this compact, including interstate portability of license and interstate collaboration and access to information and licensing. And obviously, we all know there is such a shortage of nurses, and our own hospitals here are having to call in quite a few travel nurses that travel, the traveling nurses, which are not the most efficient way to run a hospital because it's very expensive to bring those nurses in. So this may have a lot of benefits to us. So the legislature this past session wrote a bill and it's very comprehensive. So I'm going to go through that with you. The summary of the bill is that it's three main provisions in the bill, about the multi-state license itself, and that you can also have a one compact license. So a nurse can be part of the multi-state license, but if he or she doesn't meet the criteria or chooses not to, they can also have a home state license just from their home state. There are, I'm looking for the number, I think there are 67, no, that can't be, because there are only 50 some odd states here, 50 nifty states. But anyway, there's quite a few states that are involved with this compact, and the requirements for a licensure are very specific. Criminal background check, meet the qualifications for licensure. You have to be a graduate, have degrees, have the training. You have to successfully pass the RN and PN examinations or tests. You have to be eligible to hold one license in the compact, and it must be unencumbered, so allows you to practice wherever. You can practice, you can provide support for medicine or in person, and you obviously can't be found guilty of have any criminal background. And it's have to have a valid social security number. That's in every one of these things. That's kind of interesting. But what's the bill is very interesting in that it really focuses mostly on I don't know what the right word is, but on really making sure that you adhere to the rules and regulations, because there are so many states involved that there's 36 jurisdictions. I just saw my note. There are 36 jurisdictions to have enacted the NLC, and Governor Scott signed this into law June 7th of this year. It will become effective in 2022, and then we will be part of the compact. But it sets up, I think every state has this similar language in their statutes, because the state itself is responsible for conduct under the compact. And it talks about how to set up a commission, who's in charge, how to make sure there's uniformity of nursing licensing requirements, training, so that everybody's fairly much working with the same procedures and approach to medicine, which I would think, given that there are so many entities involved in this, that's not the easiest thing to do, to ensure that everybody's familiar with each state's nuances. And I think this is an attempt to make it a little bit more uniform, which would make sense to me. And then there's a lot of information about how the compact gets set up here, what our role is in the commission itself. We obviously have representation at the table, and what the authority of the commission is to set rulemaking, to set rules and regulations, what to do if a nurse is not qualified or is not following the right procedures, if there's any adverse impact of mishandling of the patient, anything with regard to performance, the commission will step in and review the nurse's conduct or the nurse's background and what he or she has done. Then they can still, if something goes awry and they're asked to step down from the compact and not be licensed, they can still apply for a home license, which gives them a little bit of a fallback position. But there's a lot of education required, a lot of oversight. And from us, it's the Office of Professional Regulations here in the Secretary of State's office. And there are, hang on a second. This goes on and on forever. More. It's just a little heavy-handed on all of the, if things go wrong. and
There's
not so
probably
much.
certain requirements that they have, though, for like as part of the compact. Like, there's probably certain things that states are required to do for reporting and whatnot, so that
Oh,
other
yes,
states
right.
in the compact can basically be aware that something's happened, an incident's happened. Here's the severity. Here's how it's handled, because that's one of the reasons I think the compact exists, is because you don't want someone who's a problem bouncing
Right,
from one hospital to another in
right.
different states and then flying under the radar.
Yeah, and then, well, this one catches it. I'll tell you, this is pages and pages of what to do if you have to take adverse reaction against a nurse, and only the home state has the power to take the action against a nurse's license. So the compact can adjudicate and then tell the home state, this is what we found, this is what has happened, and then the home state can pull the license or take action. So it's very prescriptive as to what the commission can do, and there's a laundry list of requirements. Which I personally, I mean, I think especially if you have these traveling nurses, they have to come in pretty knowledgeable about what's the expectations in a specific hospital, what's expected of nurses, and the different levels of nursing, and how to fit in with the practices and procedures of a specific hospital. So there's a lot of reporting, obviously. At the end of the year, the Secretary of State's office has to submit a huge report about how many licenses they've issued, how many individual licenses from just the state, and there's also a report about if anybody's lost money on this procedure, because the report that they did the year before said that this would be a cost neutral, or maybe even in some cases a money making effort to provide funding. But if there's some additional costs and stuff that come out in pursuing litigation against an individual person, that we don't want to lose money on this deal. It's meant to be supportive of the nursing and provide services for hospitals that are short, which we obviously know is happening all over the place. And of course, they say the administrators, the executive directors, employees of the commission, if it gets bigger than a breadbasket, they're immune from lawsuit or liability in so doing and executing their job. But it's a very prescriptive bill, and it was a little confusing reading it because it was sort of sounded very repetitive to me, and it was hard to sort out what exactly they were trying to put, what regulations on the commission, what on the home state, what exactly are the laws and responsibilities. But it's obviously going to be well received with 30 some odd entities already participating, and the study that was done back in reported in 2019 was very supportive of this concept. So if it works, it will suit us all very well, because we will have hopefully enough. There'll be enough opportunities afforded the nurses that they could go from one place to another. If they move, there is another whole section on if a nurse moves from, say, like Vermont to Pennsylvania, they no longer are part of the compact and have to go through another complete enrollment and application process to join in the Pennsylvania home state and be part of the compact through Pennsylvania. So that's really it. There's a lot of, obviously, if there's some charges brought up against the nurse, there's a lot of dispute resolution. There's a lot of opportunities afforded the nurse to have his or her appeal heard. And they also are, if it's required, to have remedial training get some specific technical assistance to these individuals if they're lacking in any one area or two. And so, as I said, the Secretary of State's office will do a lot of reporting and talk about, is this a good thing or not for us? But my initial take is that it should be a good thing, because we'll be able to transfer it. It may not be as costly as hiring in contract nurses. This will be a little bit easier process to bring a nurse in from some other state to work here in Vermont.
Is there any sort of expiration? Like, I know a lot of times the legislature will put, an expiration on something in order to force the issue to come back up again. Did they do anything like that here,
Nope.
where there's an expiration?
No, I didn't see it. Nope, I didn't see anything like that. It was just reporting on it before. This is 2024, so we're going to join in 2022. So they've given the Office of Professional Regulations till 2024 to gather all the information, data collecting. The commission has been asked to collect a lot of data on the nurses who are part of the compact, and what kind of licenses they hold, but no review date in the future. So I think it falls on the Secretary of State's office to flag it if it's not doing what we want it to do.
Yeah, so at least they've got some mandatory reporting in there so that, they can reevaluate 2 years in, it sounds.
Yeah, I think, and they've really put a lot of emphasis on training, which to me, that's the whole gist of the whole compact. If, the members have to be trained and, have the same training. Of course, I don't know how you take 32 entities and find that common ground, but maybe that's a reason for doing this as well, that there's more similarities than differences in each of the states on how they conduct themselves and handle procedures. So we will see, but
hopefully, because the problem this is trying to address, right, is the shortage of qualified nurses in the state, and there are other efforts underway, like the state colleges has a pretty strong effort in part of their realignment effort, where they're bringing all the state colleges, well, almost all of them, under the same roof. And that part of that effort is going to be focused on workforce needs, and nursing is one of the ones specifically that they've identified as a workforce pipeline shortage in Vermont. So hopefully,
well, and that's been around for quite a while. For some reason, nursing has been we've faced a shortage here before, which is sad, because it used to, I'm hoping it still is, a very well respected profession. I certainly have a great deal of respect for the nurses, particularly as we've seen during COVID what they've done, in response. But
I would say nurses have probably faced the brunt of it, more or less.
Yep. And to have it more systematic and more even among the states, so that there's more ability to go back and forth over state lines to practice. That'd be great, because I know the for hire contract nurses there, that's another whole ballgame financially, and you can't have too many of those in the hospital because the cost is outrageous.
Totally.
So that's it. I think we'll see in 2024 what the report says. I am going to invite somebody from the Secretary of State's office to be on one of our shows, just to get from them their perspective of this, and see what their take is on it, because I think they're the ones in the trenches, and would be interesting to see what they're thinking. And we'll have our representatives on the commission that is overseeing all of the states and what's happening. And we're supposed to have our own committee here that keeps tabs on what's going on in our own state, in our home state, they call it, and then feed the information up to the overarching commission. So if everybody does their part, it should be well documented and hopefully well received.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that is it for today. So,
Okay.
folks watching at home, tune in. We've got 2 episodes a week that we're doing. So keep up with us on Facebook and on Orca's website, and we'll see you next time.